Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed.
Welcome, everyone, to the Community IT Innovators webinar, Security Training for Nonprofit Grantees. Whether you're a funder or an IT person or a grantee yourself, we're glad that you're here, and we're looking forward to sharing this case study about the Legal Services Corporation and their work over the past year to ensure their grantees have the training to spot phishing emails and be able to protect their organizations. We've done a lot of webinars on cybersecurity and training over the years, which you can find on our website. But this is an interesting new conversation on that relationship between the funder and their investment in their grantees, and how to help protect the mission of those nonprofits that they fund by helping them learn to protect themselves from email scams. So our learning objectives today are that after this session, you should be able to describe the cybersecurity landscape for nonprofits, learn about compromised accounts and phishing risks, and understand what one funder did to promote email awareness training for their grantees. I want to remind everyone at the outset that Community IT is vendor agnostic, and this presentation is to discuss how nonprofits are using common tools and what we are observing about them. We aren't recommending any tools in general. We would only make recommendations to our clients based on specific business needs and nonprofit culture. So now I would love to introduce Matt, one of our presenters.
Hi, Carolyn. Thanks for the background and overview of the topic today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's a little bit of a departure from our usual webinar series, and I think this is going to be a great conversation with, I think, lots to learn. So as is mentioned, my name is Matt Eshelman. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Community IT. I've been at Community IT for a little over 20 years, and in my role now, responsible for the overall technology and strategy work and cybersecurity working with clients and also overseeing our team, where we manage about 170 different nonprofit organizations representing about 6,000 devices. So happy to be a part of this conversation today. And Carolyn, I guess you should introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Matt. My name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm in charge of outreach at Community IT, and I'm going to be helping Matt today and monitoring the chat. I'm really excited to be sharing our expertise with all of you today. I know there's been a surge in email fraud where the email looks so legitimate, but then it turns out to be just another scam. So we're happy to talk with you more about the tools that we use for training, how to spot those emails, and what to do when you click on that link by accident. So I'm looking forward to hearing about this case study today. But before we begin, if you're not familiar with Community IT, a little bit about us. We are a 100% employee-owned managed services provider, and we provide outsourced IT support. So we work exclusively with nonprofit organizations, and our mission is to help nonprofits accomplish their missions through the effective use of technology. We serve nonprofits across the United States, and we've been doing this for over 20 years. We're technology experts. We are consistently given the MSP 501 recognition for being a top MSP, which is an honor we received again in 2022. We have a lot of free resources on our website. We really feel that the more educated the nonprofit sector gets around technology, the better it is for all of us. Since it is Cybersecurity Month, I want to point out that we have a lot of resources on cybersecurity, including a short self-assessment quiz that can be helpful to you to fill out, get a baseline for where your organization is in terms of your cybersecurity. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker and practitioner, Jada Briegel from the Legal Services Corporation. Jada?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Legal Services Corporation is the largest funder of civil legal aid for low-income Americans in the nation. We were established in 1974. We operate as a nonprofit. We get an appropriation from Congress, and we distribute more than $420 million annually to 132 grantees around the country. I have been the CIO at LSC for 5 years, and I'm thrilled that we are able to offer free cybersecurity training to our grantees and all of their staff, and really look forward to the discussion today.
Thanks. So I think, we can go along to our agenda. So we're going to talk a little bit about the cybersecurity landscape for nonprofits and discuss a little bit the email phishing risks. So what are phishing emails and how do they work for the bad guys? Then we're going to do the case study with Jada and Legal Services Corporation. And I hope that we're going to be able to leave a bunch of time at the end for question and answer session with Matt and Jada. But to start things out, we always love to start with a poll. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this, and I'm going to read the options. So what is your top cybersecurity initiative in 2023? So what are you planning to do? There's security awareness training, multi-factor authentication, password manager, endpoint detection and response, pen testing, risk assessment, and policy updates. So what is your top initiative that you're going to find the bandwidth for and make time around doing?
Thanks, everybody, for responding. So it looks like of the options, the number one option is security awareness training. So that's fantastic. Love to see that. And we'll get into some of the reasons why, followed by multi-factor authentication at 18% of respondents, about 14% of respondents saying their top initiative is a password manager, and then kind of single digits down into implementing endpoint detection and response, pen testing, and about 14% of folks saying policy updates is their top priority, which I would also say is a great place to start. So thanks for those responses, and we'll get into a little bit about why I think security awareness training is a great place to start. So before we begin our conversation, I think it is helpful just to set the stage a little bit in terms of talking about the cybersecurity landscape that we're kind of all operating in. And that's one where we see persistent and ongoing brute force attacks against digital identities. Again, as many organizations have really transformed and moved resources to the cloud, I think it's been tremendously beneficial for nonprofit organizations to be able to work remotely, to have access to the latest and greatest updated tools and platforms. And so that's been a really positive evolution of nonprofit technology. But because you can log in from anywhere in the world, it also means the bad guys can too. And so there's just lots and lots of scams and techniques that are really designed to attack your digital identity. And so that's something that we see coming into our service desk. It's something through the monitoring tools that we have that we can just see that there's kind of persistent and ongoing brute force attacks against that digital identity. We also see quite a bit of really sophisticated spear phishing. And so spear phishing is different from spam, right? Spam, it's pretty clear that it's just junk. The sender is not really trying to obfuscate who they are. But with spear phishing, that's when the sender is really obfuscating who they are. They're pretending to be, somebody else. They're disguising their identity in order to get you to take some action. Again, click on a link that maybe takes you to a password harvesting site, maybe opening up a password protected document that launches malware. Again, just take some additional steps to get information about you or the organization in order to kind of further perpetrate, fraud or other cybercrime. We see that organizations are targeted because of the work that they do. I think this is particularly applicable to organizations that are kind of government and government adjacent. The really well-funded threat actors are particularly interested in organizations like that, and will have pretty sophisticated schemes targeting, organizations as there's kind of some transfer between the nonprofit sector and government. And then there's also attacks that target vendors. So as a managed service provider, that works with a lot of different organizations, we're certainly a higher value target for those threat actors. And so, other vendors in our place need to pay additional attention to the cybersecurity controls that we have to ensure the security and the integrity of the data that we're stewards of. it's not all bad. I think there's lots of great new security tools that are available to help combat all of these types of threats. I think particularly around email protection, there's some really great evolutions of spam filtering that can apply some sophisticated AI and machine learning to identify messages that tend to evade traditional spam filters. And so there's some API-driven controls that are really great at identifying and removing those messages from folks' inbox. I also think it's really great that organizations are starting to be proactive about improving their cybersecurity. I think organizations are starting to make that transition from, cybersecurity is kind of a necessary evil, something they have to do, to cybersecurity is like a good proactive thing that they can implement so that they can protect the data that they have. It's clear that nonprofit organizations still have a long way to go. A survey from N10 still showed that about 68% of nonprofits still didn't have an incident response plan. And so for all of you that have said that you're going to work on policy work, that's great. Incident response probably should be on your list. And I think the other thing to just be attentive to is that this cybersecurity landscape is really grounded in the fact that this is, we're kind of protecting ourselves from cyber criminals, right? This is a criminal enterprise that, is kind of financially motivated and financially backed. And while the big data breaches that get a lot of press in the news, multi-million-dollar impacts, the fact that it can be a very significant impact for a small to mid-sized organization. And so there's some industry research that says, the breach response for a small to mid-sized organization is around $150,000. So again, certainly not $1 million, but at $150,000 can really have a pretty significant impact for an organization's overall operations. Whenever we talk about cybersecurity readiness, this familiar rubric comes up in terms of people, process, and technology solutions. We talk about these in a little bit more detail in our cybersecurity readiness for nonprofits playbook, which provides a list of kind of foundational recommendations that nonprofit organizations can follow to make sure that they're covering all their bases. And again, we talk about things under the people, so specific things end users can do related to choosing good passwords and turning on MFA. We talk about technology solutions, of which there are many, and I love technology, and there's lots of great solutions out there related to system updating and antivirus endpoint protection and scanning and these sophisticated email tools. But then I think there's a lot of process changes, and that's what we'll talk about today in terms of the process of developing that policy, and also the process of enrolling staff in training. It's not something that's just kind of a set it and forget it approach, but really something that requires some intentionality and some planning, and something that's really needs to come from the organization and kind of from the executive leadership at the organization as well. So specifically about training, we know security awareness training works and it's effective. This is from Know4, which is a nonprofit, or which is a security awareness training vendor. And this mirrors some of the results that we see, where we do initial baseline campaigns, right? So through these security awareness training tools, we can do some test phishing messages to see who's clicking on what. Again, because if we don't measure it, we don't know the performance of staff. And so we can do some baseline phishing tests to see, who might be clicking on stuff, and then incorporate online training modules that users can complete on their own. And then we are doing ongoing training to gauge progress. And this really does mirror our experience, where we've got relatively high initial click-through rates because it's enticing. That shipping confirmation or that password reset email or the HR message that comes through really gets folks' attention. But once staff have some ongoing education, they learn some of the tricks and techniques that these threat actors are using, we really do see a pretty dramatic improvement in that click-through rate. So again, that reduces the risk quite a bit. If we go from, a third of spam or phishing messages are getting clicked on, down to the low single digits, that really, is a big reduction in our, in the risk to organizations. So as we kind of talked about in the beginning, I'm happy to have Jada here to talk about how Legal Services Corporation made the decision to pursue providing security awareness training to their grantees. And so I was wondering, Jada, if you could just talk. We'll talk a little bit more about Legal Services Corporation, the relationship that LSC has with your grantees, and then a little bit, why training. You could have chosen policy, you could have chosen, MFA, you could have chosen a lot of different security controls. What was it about security awareness training that that made that the initiative to pursue? And then just talk about some initial lessons learned. I know we're not completely done with the process, but some initial lessons learned. So so Jada, can you just kick us off here?
Sure. So let me go back to the beginning of this, which was, unfortunately, in December of 2020, LSC had a business email compromise. And it was the typical thing. The scammer figured out who the accounting people were at one of our grantees, and they figured out who the accounting people were within LSC. They set up fake domains that looked like each of ours, and they started communicating. And their whole reason for doing that was to get us to change the banking routing information for this grantee. They were successful. An accounting tech on our side changed the routing information, and they got a lot of money. So that led us to do some really hard introspection. There were a lot of things we changed on our side, but we also realized that the security of our grantees it directly impacts our security. So while I would like to say that this is just altruistic, I just want to make everybody secure, I really want to make myself secure. It was a wake-up call. We are a grantor. Our grantees don't work for us. They just get money from us. And they are nonprofits around the country. They have a business which is providing civil legal aid to underprivileged folks. So we thought long and hard about how we could influence their security. The only way we really could do that was to add a term and condition to our grants that said, we want you to do X, Y, or Z. So honestly, we thought about a lot of stuff. And one of the things we thought about was requiring cybersecurity insurance. But then you talk a little bit about that, and it's so hard to get. I know what I go through every year, and I can't require people to have that. There would be people that, would never be able to get it. So we went back to the drawing board. And we know that people are the weakest link in security. And one of the ways to educate people and to get them to stop clicking on stuff is to do cybersecurity training. So we decided to make a term and condition of our basic field grant that our grantees have to provide cybersecurity training annually to all of their employees. And our VP of Grants Management knows that this can be expensive. She didn't want to levy this on our grantees without paying for it. So she went to our board. She got money allocated for what we thought it would cost. It always costs a little bit more than what you're thinking, by the way. So we got the money allocated, and then I started with a request for proposal. I thought that the big sort of cybersecurity companies, cybersecurity training companies would come in and bid. And it was just a pipe dream because what I really needed was not just the training, but also someone to help set it up and to manage it and to help our grantees. Because the other thing is, I don't want access to their training. There's some kind of line there that I don't want to breach. So I don't have access to their training. I needed somebody else to have that. And that's when we found you all at Community IT We have potentially 13,000 plus employees at our 132 grantees. We have 9,000 users. You probably know the exact amount, Matt. We have just over 9,000 set up today. And the feedback has been pretty positive. I think that people are happy that we're willing to pay for this. I'm trying to make it, and this is sort of for the other grantors out there, I don't want it to be big brotherish. I don't want to see what they're doing. I just want to know that they're doing it. So we have reports that come in from community IT. Just tell me that it's done or not done. And that's where we leave it. Now, we do other things to try and help improve security. We make sure at our annual tech conference that we have cybersecurity presentations. We do presentations like at Equal Justice Conference and wherever we can possibly do them about the importance of all sorts of security things. We had a conference of our executive directors last month. Those are all the heads of our grantees. We had the FBI come in and talk to them about cybersecurity, which it should show what importance we put on this, because they had 2 days together and they hadn't seen each other for years, where they had to cram a whole bunch of important things in, and we spent an hour on cybersecurity. And I feel like it's working. And a sort of amusing story, we, all of these executive directors were at this conference, and they are starting to put in their for their payments for us to pay for their travel. We have a system also because of the business email compromise where we have to set vendors up, and they started getting emails from this vendor portal. And so many of them started reporting them as phishing. It really warmed my heart that the message is out there and people are looking at emails that closely. And that's kind of the thumbnail sketch of the story.
Yeah, I think it's, I think it's a really great story. And I think you've touched on a number of different themes that, I think many organizations experience in terms of, like having a business email compromise scenario really reveal maybe some process weaknesses and some training, deficiencies in an organization. Again, cybercrime, it's a criminal enterprise. They don't care that you're funding, legal aid, and that's not the point. It's the fact that you've got financial resources and they can exploit that. I think the comment that you had about, all the different things that you could do, requiring cyber liability insurance, kind of certain security controls, and kind of landing on security awareness training, I think is effective because, as those organizations, look for cyber liability insurance on their own, that's certainly something we're seeing. This is a required element of many, cyber liability insurance carriers these days. And so again, if those organizations are kind of going out trying to find it, this does give them one more checkbox to put, to kind of put on the list of, yes, we're doing that and including that as coverage. So, I think it kind of checks off a lot of the boxes in terms of, why security awareness training I think is so effective and I think so valuable to implement. I want to maybe pop up another slide here to just talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned. As you mentioned, so you've got about 13,000 grantee users all total. And we have a little over 9,000 users in the platform so far. So we're making pretty good progress. There's some organizations we still need to get onboarded, and there's some organizations that, already had security awareness training.
Some of our grantees have opted to use their own training, which is fine, because I just care that they're doing it. Yeah. Again, I think, there's a couple of tools, obviously we picked one that, I think we're using for most folks.
And I think the big lesson, especially as an implementer, it's, the platform that you use is important, and you obviously want it to be effective, but the real investment, and this is a lesson that we're continually learning, is really the training and the supporting processes around it. We've worked with a number of organizations, that maybe had it in place or they had purchased it already. And I think, making that transition from just purchasing security awareness training to actually implementing it, that's a big gap. And, just because you have a product in place doesn't mean that you're using it effectively. And it really does require, I think, focused and expert attention to make the system work. I think you've got some grantees that already had it in place and we're doing a really fantastic job with adopting the platform. But I think that's the exception rather than the rule. And so I think through this process, the technical setup is very straightforward. There's not many boxes to check, but it's a lot of the back and forth, the training, the scheduling, the education, answering why and kind of how we're doing it, I think have been some of the lessons learned.
Many of our grantees, I shouldn't say many, some of our grantees do not have dedicated IT people. So I don't want to put a burden on them that they need to assign someone and go out and learn how to implement this, which is why, one of my lessons learned was it's not just about buying the tool or the service. You also have to account for the implementation and the support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's what we have up in here, in terms of the challenges, right? Going and implementing a new training program at 132 different organizations, representing, almost 13,000 users is a pretty big lift. And I think, we've been doing this for, over 6 months now. And I think, the success and the challenges there, I think, are balanced, right? A lot of people are very excited to get this started. I think we saw from the poll earlier in the presentation, most people have security awareness training on their list of things to do. So people were excited to get this done. I think they were excited to have it paid for. But there's lots of other competing priorities. I think, IT at nonprofits is typically very resource constrained. There's lots of competing initiatives and priorities that come down. And I know that that's something that we've really had to work around, legal system migrations, file migrations, new phone systems, office moves. I mean, there's just lots of things that IT has to tackle. And so, security awareness training, it's not something that IT can kind of just do in the background, right? They can't install a new antivirus product that nobody really, is impacted by. They're asking their staff to take time out of their day to do this training. And so I think that's been a challenge that organizations have had to navigate. And as you mentioned, a lot of the organizations, some are large and have in-house IT, but, a lot of organizations have external IT partners, they're analog to community IT that's providing service. And so that's required, some navigation as well. Again, we want to make sure that we're not viewed as a threat to those providers. And we're here to support this training initiative from LSC. I'll say the other thing that I've noticed in terms of being in a lot of these conversations with organizations is I think the security awareness training, I think particularly as it supports the end user, is that in addition to the security awareness training piece, again, many organizations are really excited to get that in place. It's a good opportunity for organizations to learn about some other technologies that end up being touched on as part of a training implementation. So for the process that we're doing, we've got some automation that we're building in with kind of automatic group enrollment. So again, if you're an Azure user, you can use some built-in Azure groups to automatically provision those users into the security awareness training tool, and also use single sign-on. So I think that's been, a great tool for organizations to kind of see how specific technologies like SCIM and single sign-on work. It's a great tool to kind of roll out with a new tool that nobody else has really seen before. So I don't know, Jada, if there's been some like other lessons learned or things, kind of reflecting back that, maybe we could have been, done a little bit differently at the very beginning of this process?
I think, some of our grantees probably would have wanted a little more information to start with, but I can't think of other things. We had a couple webinars. We put together a frequently asked questions. Of course, it's buried on our website somewhere. Isn't that always the problem? Yeah, I think we've hit a bunch of the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question, if you don't mind. Was there something at the beginning that you thought was going to be a challenge that didn't turn out to be one? Or vice versa? Was there something that kind of came out of the blue and turned out to be a big, more difficult than you expected it to be?
I think for me, I'm always just blissfully happy that everything's going to just work, the way you expect it to. I think that it's taken longer than I expected to get folks onboarded and ready to use the platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say, I'm with you, in terms of being very optimistic about how things will go. I think we had, some sense, right? So we do security awareness training with a lot of our clients. And so, we've got a pretty well-defined process, even kind of coming into it and applying it to all of the grantees. But it has taken, I think, a lot longer to just kind of make those connections. I think originally, because grantees have access to the whole KnowBe4 platform, we were, I think, really excited and like showing off, hey, here's all the things that you can do in here. It's a very powerful platform. There's lots of features and capabilities. But I think over time, we've really tried to focus that down to say, like, here's just the requirements, right? So LSC is saying you have to do, X and Y, and that's it. Like, we're just going to focus on that. If down the road, after all the, the requirements have been met, if you want to learn about Z, we can talk about it. But, trying to get that time with the grantees has been, it's tough. I think people are very busy, especially if you have to work with, third-party providers. And so I think that's the lesson that we've learned over time, is to really be very focused in what we're doing, to really get that minimum viable, requirement done so that we can, get that completed. Then if we have other time, we can move on, but really focusing on getting as much done we can when we have that meeting. Because again, we talked about that competing priorities. There's lots of other stuff that gets in the way. And, if something's not on fire, it can be hard to get the appropriate attention. So I think that's been a lesson learned for me as well.
My hope is that as folks start using this, that they see all of the other things that they can do in there. It's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Where do you think I got the information to send out my weekly annoying emails to everybody at Legal Services Corporation? I got them from KnowBe4 because they provide a whole package. And so I'm hoping that folks, they had to get on the platform because LSC said it was required. They needed to do something, but I'm hoping that as they look around in there, they can find all kinds of fun things.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.